February 23, 1964, Daytona Beach, Florida. A 26-year-old driver from North Carolina is about to change everything. Richard Petty fires up his Plymouth Belvedere, and under that hood sits something the competition has never seen. An engine so dominant, so terrifyingly powerful that within months it would be banned from NASCAR entirely. This is the Chrysler 426 Hemi. But here's what most people don't know. Ford's response to the Hemi was even more extreme. They built an engine in just 90 days that made the Hemi look tame on paper, an engine that NASCAR banned before it ever turned a single competitive lap. This is the story of the 426 Hemi versus the 427 SOHC Cammer, two legendary engines that were literally too powerful for stock car racing. Let's go back to that 1964 Daytona 500. Chrysler had been getting destroyed by Ford on the NASCAR circuit. Ford's 427 high-riser engine had won race after race, and the suits at Chrysler were done being embarrassed. Company president Lynn Townsend gave his engineers one simple order: build something that dominates Daytona. What they created was a monster. The 426 Hemi combined the bulletproof bottom end of Chrysler's Max Wedge block with a completely redesigned top end, featuring hemispherical combustion chambers. Those Hemi heads weren't just marketing speak. They positioned the spark plug right in the center of the chamber, allowing larger valves and better airflow than any Wedge design could match. The result was 425 horsepower and 490 pound-feet of torque. At least that's what Chrysler claimed on paper. The real numbers were much higher. When independent shops put stock Hemis on the dyno, they pulled nearly 500 horsepower. Chrysler had deliberately underrated the engine to keep insurance companies and NASCAR officials off their backs. But on race day, there was no hiding what this engine could do. Richard Petty took the lead on lap 2 of that Daytona 500, and he never looked back. 184 of the 200 laps, Petty led, a record that still stands today. Plymouth finished 1, 2, 3. Ford didn't just lose. Ford got humiliated. And back in Dearborn, Michigan, the engineers who built that high-riser 427 watched their dominance disappear in a single afternoon. Ford's response was immediate and extreme. Within days of that Daytona disaster, Ford's Total Performance division got the green light for one of the most ambitious engine projects in automotive history. They would build a single overhead cam version of the 427, and they would do it in 90 days. Hot Rod magazine would later call it the 90-day wonder. The engineering team took their proven 427 side oiler block and completely redesigned the top end. Instead of push rods, each cylinder bank got its own chain-driven overhead camshaft sitting directly above hemispherical combustion chambers. Yes, Ford built their own Hemi heads, and they used a single overhead cam to eliminate the valve train components that limited how high a pushrod engine could rev. The numbers were staggering. With a single 4-barrel carburetor, the Cammer produced 616 horsepower at 7,000 RPM. Add the dual 4-barrel setup, and output jumped to 657 horsepower at 7,500 RPM with 575 pound-feet of torque. This wasn't just more powerful than the Hemi, it was in a completely different league. But the Cammer had one critical weakness: a timing chain that stretched nearly 6 feet long, snaking around both cylinder heads. At high RPM, that chain would stretch, throwing off cam timing between the two banks. Engineers had to offset the timing by 4 to 8 degrees to compensate. It worked, but it was a constant headache that would plague the engine throughout its racing career. Ford submitted the Cammer to NASCAR for 1965 competition approval. NASCAR's response was swift and devastating: rejected. Bill France, NASCAR's founder, took one look at that overhead cam design and said absolutely not. The official reason was that Ford hadn't put the engine in any production vehicles. But everyone knew the real story. France had seen what the Hemi did to competition in '64. He wasn't about to let Ford unleash something even more powerful. And here's where it gets interesting. NASCAR also banned the Hemi for '65, calling both engines special racing engines that had no place in stock car competition. Chrysler was furious. They pulled out of NASCAR entirely for the 1965 season in protest. Ford, meanwhile, kept racing with their conventional pushrod 427. Chrysler eventually complied. They developed a street version of the Hemi, sold enough to homologate it, and returned to NASCAR in '66. Richard Petty promptly won the Daytona 500 again. But the Cammer, it never turned a single competitive lap on a NASCAR oval. The engine that Ford built specifically to destroy the Hemi was banned before it could even try. So Ford did what any self-respecting performance division would do. They took the Cammer drag racing, and that's where things got really interesting. Ford shipped engines to some of the biggest names in the sport: Connie Kalitta in Michigan, Pete Robinson in Atlanta, Lou Baney in California, whose dragster was piloted by a young Don Prudhomme. These weren't hobby racers. These were the absolute elite of American drag racing. In 1965, Connie Kalitta became the first driver to hit 200 miles per hour at an NHRA national event in his Cammer-powered Bounty Hunter dragster. Pete Robinson took the 1966 NHRA World Championship with a Cammer under the hood. And in 1967, Kalitta did something that's never been done before or since. He won the top fuel class at the AHRA and the NHRA Winter Nationals and the NASCAR Winter Championships all in the same year. The only Triple Crown winner in drag racing history. All powered by Ford's 90-day wonder. But the Hemi wasn't sitting idle. On the drag strip, the 426 Hemi became the engine every other manufacturer had to beat. Those hemispherical heads that dominated NASCAR translated perfectly to quarter-mile competition. The engine's massive torque curve made it ideal for launching hard off the line, and its reliability under extreme conditions meant it could handle nitromethane better than almost anything else on the market. By the late 60s, top fuel dragsters running supercharged Hemis were posting quarter-mile times in the low 7-second range at over 200 miles per hour. The Cammer was faster on paper, but the Hemi was more durable, more developed, and had better parts availability. When Ford's factory support dried up in the early 70s, most Cammer teams eventually switched to Hemis. Even Connie Kalitta, Ford's most successful Cammer pilot, had to adapt Chrysler connecting rods and bearing designs to keep his Cammer running. So which engine was better? On pure horsepower, the Cammer wins. 657 versus 425 isn't even close. But horsepower doesn't tell the whole story. The Hemi had something the Cammer never achieved: production viability. Chrysler sold nearly 11,000 street Hemis between '66 and '71. The Cammer was only ever available as a crate engine through Ford's parts counter for about $2,300. The Hemi dominated NASCAR after its return in '66. It powered Richard Petty to championship after championship, including his legendary 1967 season where he won 27 races. The Cammer never got that chance. But on the drag strip, both engines proved they belonged among the greatest American V8s ever built. Today, both engines are the stuff of legend. Original Cammers are incredibly rare, with estimates suggesting Ford built only around 500 total. Original Hemi muscle cars regularly sell for 6 figures at auction, with the rarest examples pushing into 7 figures. But the real legacy isn't about collector values. It's about what these engines represented. The 426 Hemi and the 427 Cammer were both too powerful for their time. They pushed the limits of what NASCAR was willing to allow, and when the sanctioning body drew the line, both manufacturers found ways to keep racing. The Hemi adapted and became a production legend. The Cammer refused to compromise and became a drag racing icon. Two different paths, two legendary engines, one incredible rivalry that changed American motorsports forever. If you grew up dreaming about muscle cars, if you ever heard a big block V8 at full throttle and felt your heart rate spike, then you understand why these engines matter. The Hemi versus the Cammer isn't just about horsepower numbers. It's about an era when American manufacturers were willing to build the most extreme engines imaginable, just to prove they could. Drop a comment and tell me which engine you'd choose. The Chrysler 426 Hemi that dominated NASCAR and became a street legend? Or the Ford 427 Cammer that was so powerful it got banned before it could even race? Hit that subscribe button if you want more stories about the engines that defined American performance, and I'll see you in the next one.